Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. I'm starting in front of my storage area here as something of a personal commitment to myself. I've started drafting the facade for this thing in creative and we're going to be bringing it into survival in upcoming episodes. I'm basically committing to this now so that you guys will hold me to it. But finally, I've started drafting the shell for this entire thing and it's going to turn it into an actual building. But that means today I need to step away from this and go and find something else to do because this is still in the drafting process and I'm not really ready to finish it off quite yet and get it all done. So instead, we're going to go out into the world in search of a couple of Minecraft's less used but still kind of notable weapons. We're going to craft one of these at home, but the other one we need to go out in search of. We're going to spend today's episode talking about tridents and crossbows. Now, the difficulty with this is that we need to go out into the ocean in search of the drowned to get hold of a trident. They cannot be crafted and they cannot be found any other way than by fighting the drowned one-on-one in combat. And the drowned with tridents are the only ones who can drop a trident. This is at least the case in Java Edition, and I believe it's now the case in Bedrock Edition as well, although it used to be the case that drowned still had a small chance of dropping a trident even if they weren't holding one. In Java Edition, unfortunately, we have to go out in search of trident-wielding drowned in order to acquire one for ourselves. And so, for this, I brought along a sword which has the looting enchantment. Unfortunately, I've only got looting 2 on this so far, but instead of just grinding for a while to get enchanted books for looting 3, I think I'm going to head out here and chance it and hope that looting 2 will be enough. Now, in theory, the drowned can be found basically anywhere in the deep ocean. You will typically find, as you lower yourself to the ocean floor, that drowned will come out in areas where it is dark enough, and it's pretty much always dark enough down here, give or take the glow lichen and a little bit of light from magma blocks. In fact, one is rising to meet us right now, although unfortunately this guy just has a fishing rod instead of the trident we're looking for. We got the fishing rod though, and as a rule of thumb, the equipment that the drowned hold in their left hands, usually fishing rods or nautilus shells, is more or less a guaranteed drop when you kill that drowned. However, the ones that are wielding tridents as a weapon hold them in their right hand. And at that point, the odds of them dropping a trident are about the same as a zombie wielding a sword dropping the sword when you kill them. Simply put, it's not going to happen all the time. But we're going to be cruising around here until we find, there we go, a trident-wielding drowned. And at this point, I recommend bobbing and weaving, using your shield where you need to, even though the shield is looking a little bit low on durability for me, and killing the drowned as swiftly as possible. And as you saw there, unfortunately, it is not a guarantee that we get the trident from him. In this case, we just got ourselves some rotten flesh. Now, overall, it may be a little easier searching for the drowned at night than it is during the day, not least because the drowned will spawn more frequently below the surface after the sun has set, and it's easier for them to spawn slightly closer to the surface of the water. You'll also find that areas like this, where ocean ruins have generated, are the ideal place to go hunting for the drowned, since the drowned will actually generate here when the chunks themselves generate, and typically you'll find that they stick around for a little while afterwards. These ruins aren't guaranteed to have a drowned wielding a trident in them, but it can happen fairly frequently, and at least they are more guaranteed places to find the drowned in the first place. Now, the other thing we can look for here is the chests inside of these ruins, because they will also contain treasure maps. And if we find a treasure map in one of these, yep, there we go, we should hopefully locate a buried treasure chest, which is going to give us a couple of free potions of water breathing, which we might need if we want to search some of the subterranean levels underneath the ocean surface in order to locate a couple more drowned. It will also, frankly, give you something else to do whilst you are searching for a drowned with a trident, because if you're going out there and trying to do this intentionally, it can be a bit of a slog finding a drowned that has a trident and then finding one that will drop the trident when you kill it. We do have another one over here though, so I'm going to do my best to approach, strafing in the water as I do. We're going to take a couple of hits here and there. But there we go, another drowned with a trident has just killed that one for us. Unfortunately, I believe... Oh, this one's a baby drowned with a trident, so a little bit more agile in the water here. And we have a whole horde of them approaching us right now. We have a whole horde of them approaching us right now, so I'm going to try my best to maneuver so that some of these drowned are in the way of the trident throwing one, and hopefully they'll take a little bit of additional damage from that. Unfortunately, I believe it does need to be a player kill on the Drowned in order for them to have a chance to drop the Trident. So if one Drowned kills another with the Trident, that's really not going to help matters. One final thing I will add here is that these ocean ruins will not perpetually spawn Drowned. There is a misconception that these are kind of like ocean monuments, where Guardians spawn frequently in that area. The same is not true of the Drowned in these ocean ruins. If you spot any Drowned spawning here after World Generation, that's not some kind of mechanic tied to these structures, it's really just the natural spawning of the ocean having to spawn the Drowned somewhere. It looks like this little sandbar here is the location of our buried treasure chest, and if we haven't covered this in the series so far, now is the time to teach you the magic trick to finding these treasure chests in Java Edition, and it all has to do with your relative coordinates inside of the chunk. If we press F3 and look under the X, Y, Z, the more precise coordinates with the decimal points after them, you'll notice the block coordinates, and beside the block coordinates, a little section that is in brackets where it says 7, 14, 9. We want to line this up so that our coordinates on the X and Z axes are at 9, 9, which is roughly going to be back here and over by one block. Now we're going to dig down right here, and we'll immediately find that buried treasure chest, along with the potions of water breathing I was talking about. Thanks to the way the game distributes these treasure chests, you'll find every single buried treasure map you ever dig up the chest for points to a 9, 9 coordinate like this. Basically, if we were to have the chunk grid on display here, you go to the northwest corner of this chunk, you count over 9 blocks this way, and you count over 9 blocks this way, and that is where you will always find the treasure chest for one of these buried treasure maps. Anyway, now we've got some water breathing potions. We could of course have brewed them ourselves using a pufferfish back at home, but we can begin an underwater hunt for the Drowned in cave layers, where you'll typically find that you're going to encounter Drowned if you swim down into these darker regions. While we're down here, I've even run into some diamond ore, which I'm going to silk touch real fast, since there seems to be a decent amount of it down here. And one more piece of advice I will give you is that if you have trouble finding Drowned out in the open ocean, look for a stretch of ocean or an aquifer that overlaps with a dripstone cave biome. Drowned spawning is much more frequent in dripstone caves, and it may give you the edge you need in order to find one of these trident-wielding guys. And it looks like, yes, we got one from that guy along with the Nautilus shell he was holding, so that's frankly a pretty epic victory. Now, in ideal circumstances, we actually want to get hold of 2 tridents if possible, since tridents have 2 mutually exclusive enchantments, which is to say there are some enchantments that cannot be overlapped onto the same piece of equipment, meaning if we really want to get the most out of tridents in this episode, we will need to find another. And while we're on the topic, here is one other thing to be aware of. If we lure some zombies into open water, you'll notice that the zombies tend to sink, and after a while of being submersed underwater like this, they will actually transform into the Drowned. As they track towards the player, you'll notice that they are shaking ever so slightly, and sooner or later, once they've stopped taking damage on these magma blocks, they will convert into the Drowned and start swimming towards me a little bit faster. Now, don't be fooled into thinking that this is another opportunity to get hold of a Trident. If a zombie converts into a Drowned, there is no likelihood whatsoever of them holding a Trident when they transform. If they are not holding a Trident already when they're a zombie, they will not be equipped with it when they transform into a Drowned. And so, unfortunately, it isn't possible to acquire a bunch of Tridents by, let's say, waterlogging a zombie spawner and just letting a bunch of them spawn and convert. I believe for a while that was a common technique on the Bedrock Edition of the game, where any Drowned would have the opportunity to drop a Trident, even if it wasn't equipped with one, but sadly, on Java Edition, that's never been the case. Although it is entirely possible to convert zombies into Drowned in order to get hold of copper, which is a rare drop from Drowned. So it's potentially likely that we're going to be using that in future to farm large amounts of copper for building. Well, we have another candidate here. Let's see if we can get Trident number 2 off of this guy. He's definitely giving us a run for our money, but nope, looks like just rotten flesh from that one. Another ocean ruin has yielded 2 more opportunities to get a Trident from a Drowned. This one, unfortunately, we have the first one down and no Trident. Let's see if we can get one from the second. Nope, looks like that was rotten flesh as well. There we go, finally. We finally got a second one. Oh, I'm so happy. Just for context, I have just spent about 2 hours worth of my time looking for Drowned Tridents. Like, the recording timer on this video says 2 hours, and obviously I've cut out the majority of that, but I found this pretty decent river biome where the drowned will spawn more frequently in rivers, but this is usually offset by the amount of terrain around rivers where other hostile mobs can spawn, especially during the night. And there are caves around and that kind of stuff, right? So typically you don't tend to find that many more drowned in a river biome under normal circumstances than you do out in the open ocean. But around here, there's a lot of caves which are flooded, and so I've been swimming on down here, you know, alighting on some of these magma blocks just to get my breath back, searching this cave to see if any drowned spawn down here, which a surprising amount of them have. And since this is all still underneath a river biome, we do end up getting a few more drowned spawning. So I've been coming down here, killing any drowned that are down here, or at least focusing on the ones with tridents if I possibly can, then swimming back out into the river and dealing with a few more out here, grabbing a few more nautilus shells, a few more copper ingots, and just slicing away at them when I can. Or I drive my boat around on the surface until I hear one throwing a trident at me, because while the rest of them will not really follow you too closely if you are on the surface in a boat, the majority of the drowned throwing tridents seem to pick up on the fact that you're there, and even during the daytime, even though you're not in the water, they're going to come up and attack you. But after all of that, finally I have ended up with 2 tridents. So at last, we can head on home, and I can start talking about what on earth these things are for. Hey folks, welcome back. So, after returning from that little excursion, we've got our 2 tridents in hand, and we are ready to do some enchanting. Now, of course, you're looking at these and thinking they're pretty heavily damaged, and that's going to be the case with basically any equipment you receive from a mob. I think it is more or less impossible for you to get a shovel from a zombie or a bow from a skeleton and have it be at full durability. And unfortunately with tridents, we do not have any kind of material in the game that acts as the repair material for them in the same way that using diamonds on this diamond X would repair the durability on it. You can combine 2 tridents to get some of that durability back, but that is obviously not the best thing to do right now when tridents come at such a premium. So instead, we're going to rely on adding the mending enchantment to these tridents to make sure they can recover all of that durability and stay fully repaired for the foreseeable future. But of course, that's going to require us trading a couple of mending books. I've only got 1 handy right now. I don't think I have any elsewhere in here, and we can probably go over to our trading post over in the igloo to get a mending book from that villager. Before we put mending on the trident though, I want to take a look at our enchanting opportunities, because right now this one is only showing Unbreaking 3. So we'll try and put that on here and see what else, if anything, we end up getting. That has Loyalty 3 on it. Okay, so that's pretty standard, I suppose. Since it also now has Unbreaking 3, I don't feel too bad about throwing this trident a couple of times so I can demonstrate the effect of loyalty. And our other trident is currently still unenchanted, and this is what happens when you throw a trident. You pull it back to throw it, you simply huck it in that direction, and much like the tridents the drowned have been throwing at me this whole time, it will stick in the block. However, unlike those tridents, we can walk over and collect it in much the same way you can collect arrows that haven't been shot from a bow with infinity. But in this case, the Loyalty Trident removes that from the equation by giving us the opportunity to simply recall it without really doing anything. It hits whatever you've targeted, and then it will return to your hand without you having to click again or anything like that. So let's say I wanted to kill one of these cows inside the cow pen. We can simply throw our trident at it, and unfortunately it doesn't do enough damage that it kills it, but tridents will do about as much attack damage as an unenchanted diamond sword, so they're actually fairly effective at what they do. You can use them as a melee weapon as well, but they are most effective when thrown. In fact, they are probably most effective when thrown in the water, because tridents are unaffected by the drag that affects projectile weapons like arrows underwater, so if you're raiding an ocean monument with one of these, or just attacking a bunch of drowned as we've been doing for the rest of the video, it may be helpful to have a trident around so that you can throw stuff at them from range and keep them at bay whilst you deal some damage. Now we're going to return to the attic to do a little bit more enchanting here. We're going to throw the other one in here. That's also coming up with loyalty, so I might give that a quick reroll. We'll enchant it once just to make sure that we're getting what it says we're getting, and that one now comes with Impaling as well. That might actually be worth keeping around, because Impaling is an enchantment which allows it to do more damage to aquatic mobs. Now that's a very specific category of mobs, and unfortunately on Java Edition right now, the drowned do not fall into that category. They are technically speaking undead mobs, so the enchantment that does more damage to them is Smite. The only hostile mobs that are currently affected by the Impaling enchantment are Guardians and Elder Guardians. So once again, this would be the perfect tool to go raiding an Ocean Monument with if your goal was to attack all of the Guardians. And hitting Guardians with ranged weapons like Tridents means that you bypass that Thorns effect that would activate if you hit them with a melee weapon like a sword. So Tridents, once again, proving their worth there. So at this point, now this Trident is actually doing slightly better in terms of enchantments. I'm going to grindstone off the Trident with 15 durability. We'll get a bit of that XP back, and we'll see if anything else comes up in the enchantment table. Unfortunately, Impaling is coming up again, and the enchantment that I'm looking for from the enchantment table right now is actually mutually exclusive with the enchantments that encourage you to throw the Trident, because it works a little bit differently. And if we can re-roll the table here maybe one more time, let's see if we get something a little different. There we go. We now have Riptide and Unbreaking, and this is going to be an interesting experiment. Riptide comes in 3 levels. We only have Riptide 2 on this Trident right now, so we might shoot for something a little bit better in a second. But since it is currently raining outside, we can take advantage of the fact that Riptide is something that instead of throwing a Trident, the Trident throws you. If you end up holding down, like pulling back the Trident and then releasing it, it will shoot you through the air like this. And it has the potential to shoot you directly up into the air as well, although you might want to make sure you have feather falling and protection on your armor to make sure that you're okay with taking that amount of fall damage. Alternatively, you can land in water, or if you are agile enough, you can simply keep spamming the Riptide enchantment and you can travel quite quickly that way, effectively flying through the air, especially if you have enough height when you begin. Just be aware of how much height you have when you're going to fall. Naturally, right now we don't want to spam those too much because it decreases the durability of your weapon every time you use that enchantment, much the same way as throwing it and hitting something does. Riptide Tridents, as I mentioned, can still be used as melee weapons, but their principal use is as a form of transport. And when combined with Elytra, the wings that we're going to get once we have been to the end, it makes for a really effective way to travel when it's raining. Unfortunately, once it stops raining, the Riptide effect can only take effect if you are already immersed in water somehow. So we could leave this puddle of water that I have here so that I can refill any buckets, but I wouldn't be able to fly around by spamming Riptide repeatedly the same way that I can do while it's raining. So the fact that it started raining during this video, actually pretty helpful. Maybe we'll grind off the Riptide from this Trident and give it one more attempt. Now you're talking. Now we have something else coming up in the table, and this is really unfortunate because this is one of the enchantments that I would really like to apply to the Impaling and Loyalty Trident. Channeling is an enchantment unique to Tridents which allows you to channel lightning through the Trident whenever there is a storm. And I won't apply it here. Instead, I'll try and roll for a book which has the channeling enchantment on it, because then we can apply that to our Impaling Trident, and once we have mending on that, it's going to be a pretty formidable weapon. In the event of a thunderstorm, throwing a channeling Trident at a target will strike the target with lightning, and in some cases that can have some unforeseen effects, which we'll get into in future episodes. But if you've ever had a herd of pigs struck by lightning and found that some of them turn into zombie pigmen, that is just one of the many effects that we can discover with the channeling enchantment on a Trident. Naturally, we can also direct lightning using lightning rods, but channeling allows us to turn it into more of a weapon that we can use at range, and we can even strike creepers with lightning to turn them into charged creepers, which has the effect of making their explosion radius a lot larger and has some interesting side effects, which once again we'll get into when we can cover that in future episodes. Now, if you're a player on Bedrock Edition, you might find that the Impaling enchantment actually works a little bit different differently, and Impaling will deal additional damage to mobs that are in water or out in the rain. So on Bedrock Edition right now, you'll find that the Impaling enchantment is actually a lot more useful than it is on Java Edition. And that may change for Java Edition players in future, because there was talk a little while ago of updating Minecraft's combat system to bring Bedrock and Java a little closer in line. But for now, if you're a Java Edition player, you might not find Impaling all that useful. Channeling, on the other hand, you might find useful in the right circumstances. And so it's worth us trying a couple of times to get it on an enchanted book so that we can apply it to our Trident here. For now, I am fairly confident that I'm going to keep the Impaling Trident, so we're going to add the Mending book to that. I'm going to disenchant all of these books that I've been using to reroll the enchantment table, both to get a bit of experience back and to make sure that we can use them for additional attempts. And then we'll probably head over to my XP farm with the skeleton spawner and see if we can get something that works better for these books. But while we're there, we might also take a look at another weapon, which has a slightly more complicated crafting recipe. First of all, we'll need to make a couple of tripwire hooks, which you can also fish up as junk from fishing, but they are pretty useful for redstone contraptions and a few other things. And you'll notice that now we have some sticks, some string, some tripwire hooks, and some iron ingots in the crafting interface. The recipe for a crossbow appears, which is 3 sticks, 2 string, an iron ingot, and a tripwire hook. We're going to grab one of those, and if you dispatch the pillager patrols from around your base as diligently as I do, you might have encountered a crossbow already. They are the weapons wielded by pillagers. Simply hold down right-click to load one completely, and then the arrow will stay in it permanently. You can switch away from the weapon, and anytime you want to use it, you can simply right-click to fire it instantly. Much like a bow that hasn't been enchanted with infinity, you can then go and pick up these arrows, because crossbows will consume arrows, and there is no infinity enchantment for a crossbow. In fact, crossbows have their own unique set of enchantments, which we're going to explore with this little enchanting session as well. So I'm going to take this crossbow over to our enchanting setup, and we'll see what we get on that while we're there. Oh yes, here is the other place you may have encountered crossbows already, piglins. Piglins also use them in much the same way that pillagers do, and unfortunately, I'm not in the habit of wearing gold every time I come through to the nether, so we are having to dispatch these piglins from a distance. Anyhow, down here at the skeleton spawner, we can put the crossbow into the enchantment table as well, and it looks like it's only giving us a couple of quick charge enchantments for both of these, so I think it's probably better that we focus on the Trident and the enchanted books first. And with a bit more time spent at the skeleton spawner, we are now at 33 levels, and I've managed to get Riptide 3 to come up on the enchantment table. So here we go, we're going to add that on there. Oh, we do get Impaling as well. I guess it does still apply if you're attacking with melee damage. It's just not all that effective because we're not throwing it. But either way, it seems like Riptide and Loyalty are the really mutually exclusive ones, and I don't think you can put Channeling on a Riptide Trident either, because it's not really possible to throw it, and a lightning strike up close could potentially be very dangerous. So while we're here, since we've got a few more levels from killing some of these skeletons, we are going to put the crossbow in here and see what we get as well. Still getting quick charge 1. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that's the best enchantment we could be getting out of level 30, so I think maybe I'll try disenchanting a couple more books and re-enchanting this crossbow once something else comes up. Unbreaking 3, Quick Charge 1 is appearing in the level 2 slot now, so as you can tell, it's really not the best we could get. Let's see what we get next time we hit 30 levels. And we're getting Piercing this time. So Piercing is an enchantment which, with each increased level, hits one additional target with your arrow. It will actually go through multiple targets. Even though it's not possible to hit more than one target with a bow, it is definitely possible to hit more than one target with a piercing arrow. In fact, since there is no infinity enchantment for crossbows, it is actually possible for a piercing arrow to pass through multiple targets, hit the ground on the other side, and for you to pick up the arrow and use it again. So it's especially worthwhile in combination with the potion-tipped arrows, which right now we don't have access to crafting ourselves, but can be purchased from master-level Fletchers. Now, part of me is wishing that we had a couple more crossbows to enchant down here, but I find myself embarrassingly low on string right now, so I'm going to go to the surface and see if there are any spiders still lurking from the previous night, but if there are not, we might need to go looking for string elsewhere. elsewhere and enchant a couple more crossbows. Okay, here we go. Local caves, abandoned mine shafts, lots of opportunities to gather some string. Also lots of opportunities to practice shooting multiple targets with a single arrow. Let's see if we can line them up here. There we go. Yes, we hit the skeleton at the back. That was pretty cool. In fact, there are multiple advancements you can get from using a crossbow, one of which involves killing 2 phantoms with a single crossbow bolt, and I don't think we've really encountered phantoms in this series yet. And for the truly adventurous, there's a secret advancement that requires you to kill 5 different mobs, all with the same piercing arrow. So you need to have the maximum level of piercing in order to pull that off. And since each level of piercing adds a target that the arrow can go through, piercing 1 allows you to hit 2 things, so piercing 4 allows you to hit 5 things. Anyway, having now grabbed a little extra iron from the iron farm, we can make ourselves another crossbow, and let's see what we get this time. Piercing is coming up again. Okay, let's see if we can re-roll for something a little different. So a few more skeletons later, I've actually managed to get something that isn't Quick Charge 1 on this one. I've got Quick Charge 2 instead. So we're going to apply that. This one comes with Piercing, Unbreaking 3, and Quick Charge, which, as the name suggests, allows you to load the crossbow faster. Since that's already better than this crossbow, we're going to disenchant that one, which does keep the arrow in there. And now Quick Charge 3 is coming up on a level 3 book, so we can potentially enchant that and combine it for Quick Charge 3. And finally, after a little more skeleton grinding, we have the opportunity to enchant this crossbow with Multishot, which is a very interesting enchant. Unfortunately, it's the only one we got on this crossbow, but there should be plenty of opportunity to try that out, especially since it is nighttime. Multishot is another one of those enchantments which, as its name suggests, makes the crossbow capable of hitting multiple targets, or at least firing multiple arrows. The hitting of multiple targets is kind of up to you. There we go, we got a couple of them at that time, and interestingly enough, it is sometimes possible to salvage arrows from a multi-shot attack, but it's only the middle arrow that can be collected. So you can actually hit mobs to either side of you with the free arrows and still collect the arrow from the middle, as far as I can tell. But the secret strength of crossbows is not just in piercing or multi-shot arrows, it is in fact in crossbows compatibility with something a little more explosive. Grabbing some gunpowder out of here and breaking down some lapis into blue dye, I've also grabbed some sugarcane from the farm that we can turn into paper, and if we put the blue dye and the gunpowder together, we end up with a firework star item. And combining that, some gunpowder and some paper, will give us fireworks that can be set off to produce a pattern as listed here with the dye color that we used. These can also be used together in tandem with crossbows, and I believe I can load it up from my inventory, but it has to be in my offhand. Normally, the arrows used by a bow or a crossbow would be the first arrows that you find in your inventory, but in the case of crossbows, they actually have to be loaded with fireworks from your offhand, which means you sacrifice any opportunity to use a shield to defend yourself if you're doing this in a player versus player combat situation, or if you're defending yourself from mobs in a regular gameplay. This cow over here is going to have to be our test subject for this slightly more explosive delivery, but if I shoot the firework at the cow like so, there you go. The cow took a little bit of damage from that firework. But that's not all, because if I were to make a few more firework stars, it's actually possible to put multiple firework stars in a package with the gunpowder and paper, and you'll notice that they actually stack. So now if we load one of those into our crossbow and fire it at the cow, provided that I hit it, there we go. The result is a lot more explosive and a lot more damage is dealt to the target. And of course it's decided to rain on my firework display, but with multi-shot, we have a little bit more opportunity to hit multiple targets with these incredibly powerful firework rockets. This is the hidden strength of crossbows, and it kind of makes up for the fact that unlike bows, they cannot be enchanted with anything that makes them more powerful. Yes, multi-shot can hit multiple targets with the same arrow, and the piercing enchantment can have an arrow travel through multiple targets, but there is no power enchantment that makes the arrow deal more damage. But with a little bit more rain, now we can very carefully, since it hasn't got mending on it yet, test out our Riptide 3 enchanted Trident and fly through the air. Sort of. We do have to come down eventually, but I think this is a really, really fun enchantment to try out. And like I said, once we have access to Elytra wings, we'll be doing a whole lot more with it. But folks, that's going to do it for our episode all about crossbows and Tridents. I think it's been fun to explore some of the alternative weapons in the game, and while I'm probably going to be sticking with my bow and my sword for the most part, there will definitely be opportunities where we can bring these into play. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care, bye for now.